Hey guys, Charles Bamideva, MaxVALoan.com. Got a special guest here with us today and a very hot topic. We have Tiffany Cross, the founder, owner, leader of Dedicated Credit Repair here in Murrieta, California. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And she is a specialist on what we're going to talk about. She's been doing it for years. Tiffany's company offers a paid service to help not just military clients, anybody, basically improve your credit score. And so we've got 5 modules in this series, and the series is credit, repair, and optimization. If you got damaged credit, hey, we're going to show you how to repair that and get to a spot where you can get financing. And if you've got okay credit, right, or even good credit, we're going to show you how to elevate that and go even higher.
Absolutely.
So we've got 5 modules. And in the first module, we're going to talk about, I'm looking at my notes here, payment history and utilization. And those are 2 of the 5?
That's correct.
Okay,
yes.
Tell us about that. Shoot, go fire ahead.
Okay, absolutely. You know, at the end of the day, it's unfortunate that this information isn't taught in school. I think most of us learn it the hard way, the school of hard knocks, so to speak. So it's so important to educate yourself on this, and kind of hard to find out, you know, where the good resources are for all this information. But first and foremost, I mean, the FICO score is designed in the 5 parts, as you mentioned. The most significant factor in the FICO score calculation is, in fact, your payment history. And consumers aren't always familiar with what that looks like. So how significant a late payment is, for example, on a credit report.
So the notes I'm looking at, 35% of the total FICO score makeup comes from your payment history.
Absolutely. In fact, what we tell our clients and consumers when they're reaching out to us is that one 30-day late can drop the score 60 to 80 points within the very first month of it hitting your credit report. So that's pretty standard. It's super traumatic. And those late payments stay for a long 7 years.
Oh, they do.
It's absolutely what I call my prison sentence for credit. So you have a 7-year sentence for most negative items, but you can expect instantly a 60 to 80 point hit from just one 30-day late hitting your credit report.
Even though the pay history only has 1/3 of the makeup of the total score.
That's correct. So they do at some point maximize how much something could affect.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, there's, people that walk out life events, unfortunate things that happen. They may have an 800 FICO score, and just a couple late payments later, they're at a low 600.
Oh my.
Super possible for that to happen.
What if someone's got collections, and we see that all the time, collections, does paying that off improve the score?
It doesn't.
It does not?
It does not. So what it does is it, of course, stops the bleeding for future issue, right? So it doesn't consistently keep, affecting the score long term. But no, you don't get the points back from what you lost. So a lot of people think, oh, that shouldn't be on my credit report because I brought it current. Or maybe the account's closed, and they think that the fact that the account is no longer open, it's no longer affecting their FICO score, when in fact, it is absolutely a negative issue for 7 years.
It's interesting you bring that up. So I've had clients, I'll tell them, hey, you've got this collection on your credit report, or you missed a couple of payments, and the knee-jerk reaction immediate is, oh, I'll just pay it off. I'll just pay it off.
Exactly.
Or, oh, I did pay it off. And their thinking is everything's good now. But the fact is the damage is done.
Absolutely.
Right? Could you expand on that?
That's exactly my point. We have the same situation during consultations. They'll say, oh, that's a medical collection. It's already been paid. But it doesn't forgive you for the months that it wasn't.
It happened.
So, the good news is that, of course, it can all be repaired. So we'll talk about that later. But at the end of the day, just keep in mind, and the first 4 years, by the way, is what we call the recency factor. So after 4 years and 1 day, you're no longer penalized to the same maximum, as you were when it first happened.
Interesting.
So things fall off automatically at 7 years, but it's considered a brand new late payment for 4 years.
Oh my goodness. So something that happened 3.5 years ago is still going to impact that customer even today, even if they've continued to pay everything else on time.
Exactly. And I think that is, human nature is to feel like, oh, that was forever ago. Really, in the eyes of FICO score, and of course, when we're looking at repairing it, is if it's 4 years old or newer, it's considered brand new.
What other kinds of items negatively impact your payment history? I mean, you've talked about a late payment. What else?
Yeah, absolutely.
Would hurt?
Late payments, of course, it's interesting on a credit report, clients will say, well, that's only, a 90-day late, although it's, basically 3 late payments. It's not one thing, it's 3 things. So a lot of times people go, that's just one 90-day late, but that's actually 3 individual 30-day lates that of course impact the score. So those each accumulate. So there's that.
Okay.
And then there's charge-offs.
Charge-offs, right.
Charge-offs and collections and things like that.
Is there a difference on the impact on the score between a charge-off and a collection?
No, it's the same. So really the word charge-off is super confusing to consumers.
Okay.
The word charge-off, all that really means is that the original creditor wrote off the bad debt and wanted the tax break on the debt. The word charge-off doesn't mean, okay, great, I'm forgiven from paying this.
Right.
So unfortunately, a lot of people will come to us and say, well, again, that's been charged off, I don't owe it.
Yeah.
Doesn't make you not owe the debt. So it's certainly something that is still owed by the consumer.
So the financial impact on that collector is what's being really depicted on there. They're not going to maybe attempt to collect on it anymore, possibly.
They're technically not supposed to collect on it, although we do see that they try often, which is good for us because it helps us get it deleted.
Right.
But really just think of it as the charge-off is truly the quiet before the storm. Essentially, they're about to sell that debt. A secondary company, of course, buys it. Collection companies buy that charged off debt. They then report that same exact debt under a new account name, number, and of course, an inflated balance with penalties and interest. So now it's kind of affecting the score twice, essentially.
Amazing. So the charge-off is still impacting the FICO score as part of the pay history, a negative pay history, even if the collector behind it has stopped all efforts to try to get the money.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's kind of a dangerous thing. A lot of times when we're talking to clients and they're trying to get qualified for mortgages and they hear, well, I really don't need to worry about this because my lender states that it's got a 0 balance because it's charged off. That's really not the case as far as the score is concerned. So underwriting guidelines and FICO score requirements need to be married and blended for all consumers. So
if you're joining us right now, we're talking about one of the 5 segments, if you would, of what affects and creates the FICO score. And we're talking about payment history, which contributes 35%.
That's correct.
Let me ask you this. Is there a difference in the strength of the impact between falling behind on, for example, an auto loan versus falling behind on a Capital One credit card, revolving versus installment?
No. And actually, quite frankly, a lot of times when consumers are like, well, gosh, I have to be late on something. We went through a pandemic. I had to make some choices, some tough choices. A lot of times they'll say, well, I was just late on my Macy's. That's not as significant as my mortgage. Well, it actually is in the world of FICO, not necessarily mortgage underwriting. Again, that's a good example. The FICO score penalizes them identically. So there is no discernment between what the 30-day late is. It will still impact the same in terms of the score damage.
When someone comes to you for your services, which Tiffany's company is engaged in the business of repairing credit, enhancing and improving credit, how are you sitting there dissecting all of this and determining, okay, your pay history is really what's beating you up? What does that look like?
I think at the end of the day, a true ethical company understands that it is 5 components that calculate a score. So although it's super important to get as many derogatory items removed as possible to bring the score up, I should mention that even just removing one 30-day late off of the credit report successfully can do a 20, 30-point bump.
Wow.
So absolutely that's imperative. But what we do is take the entire credit report and dissect it and make sure that all 5 components are working in harmony to make sure that we're optimizing, as we talked about earlier, all the parts of the FICO score. So it's more of a holistic approach rather than just components.
Wow. Interesting. 35% of your FICO score is made up of your payment history.
Yeah.
And that's inclusive of good and bad, of course. We're going to talk about some of the other aspects, such as utilization. I'm looking at my list of history, length of history, new credit. But pay history is the largest component of all of this. So for them to make their payments on time is huge.
It is so big. And at the end of the day, there are some thoughts and some laws that are, in discussion. I know the government's looking at making some potential changes where the impact of certain items would no longer be 7 years, potentially less moving forward. But as of today, and for the last 20 years, it's been 7 years for each late payment. So it's certainly important. I think at the whole idea of strategies to avoid. I mean, obviously there's certain hardships that happen that are
Sure.
kind of, happen as we adults through life.
Of course.
But there are some things you can do to avoid,
Yeah.
having them happen. And that would be, of course, like I'm a huge proponent of not doing paperless billing. At the end of the day, a lot of people will say, well, I moved, especially military clients that are saying, well, I moved, I did get my mail. But at the end of the day, when you don't see the statement, you don't always remember that there are fees and penalties and sometimes annual fees on certain credit cards.
Gotcha.
And if you're on auto pay and you're paperless, you're just setting yourself up for a potential 30-day late.
Interesting. Good stuff.
Yeah.
If you guys are watching this, you get some good intel here. It kind of goes without saying, pay your bills on time. But I like what you said. Maybe a couple of $100 Macy's credit card, you might think, hey, that's not a big deal. I'm going to fall behind 1 month right after Christmas. But that could really impact your score.
Absolutely.
Because there's no distinction or there's no discriminating factor between, hey, you fell behind on that versus a $2,500 mortgage payment.
Exactly. And, this is the time of year where we see a lot of people start co-signing, not only for, kids or, certain people in their family that they love and care for. So we do see a lot of 30-day lates on credit reports this time of year that aren't necessarily their responsibility, although they co-signed for the car, for example, if their student is in school or, maybe somebody, a family member.
Sure.
Super important to keep a really close eye on the bill paying habits of the person that you're co-signing for too.
Let me ask you something. Here we are, we're talking about payment history, but really it's only payment history that's reporting on the credit report with the three bureaus. What about a consumer that says, hey, I'm paying my rent on time. I've been paying $2,000 a month. I never missed a beat. How can they bring that good pay history to land on their credit report and thereby enhance their score?
So this was one of the few things this year that we were just super excited to launch. And it just became possible to do this about 6 months ago.
Okay.
So absolutely, consumers can now start reporting their rent, which is about time, frankly. But we absolutely can help consumers do that. But you do have to do your due diligence. And of course, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
Sure.
For example, if you don't have perfect rental history, probably not a good thing to be doing.
Okay.
You want to make sure that that when you go to your landlord and say, hey, by the way, I'm going to submit this to you to fill out and complete it, make sure you actually did pay your rent on time. But not all programs actually report to all three credit bureaus. So that's something to consider.
Okay.
Ours does. And then there are a lot of programs out there that begin reporting rent from the day that you sign up from that. Our program actually goes back 2 years. So, of course, that's huge. When you have 2 years of rental history, super big deal.
And we're talking about payment history. So if there is a perfect rent history, I mean, my gosh, it makes me ask, what are people missing out? How much of a opportunity are they leaving on the table by not voluntarily having that history reported if 35% of your credit score is made up of pay history, right?
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. There is a little bit of discussion right now because there's so many FICO scores and Vantage scores and all the things. Rental reporting right now typically helps more the Vantage score, the auto FICO, and the credit card FICO more so than the mortgage FICO score. So not to overcomplicate this, the situation, but the credit game is very much a chess game, and it's about knowing which piece to move in what order to maximize all the things. So when a consumer is trying to build their FICO score, rent reporting is actually going to help a consumer actually increase their credit card limits, which then helps their mortgage FICO. So it's just about talking with an expert, putting all the things in order to make sure you're maximizing your FICO bang for the buck.
And you are the person to call.
Thank you.
Tiffany's number is on the screen. Her company, I can vouch for that as a loan executive. We've referred clients to your service, and we've seen some miracles. I mean, these guys do a wonderful job. So we just got done talking about the first segment of 5 segments that impact your FICO score, and we'll see you on the next module.